Okay, well, this is Jason at the downtown Copperworks Distilling plant. And first of all, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Joining me today is Jeff Canoff, Vice President of Copperworks. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes giving you a little bit of background about Copperworks and some of the projects we're working on and talk more about the investment opportunity. And then we're going to leave the floor open for lots of questions. So if you do have questions, you can certainly put them in the chat and we'll see them at the end of our presentation. If you have something that's really important, you can also use the raise hand function. We may see that. We are going to ask you to leave your video and vocal mic off because this is being recorded. And as required by the SEC, we will post this to our Start Engine webpage. So if you don't want to have yourself showing on a video, then staying off video would be best. We'll also make this publicly available, so you'll be able to see this again, in case you didn't see everything. Well, what I'm going to do is turn my camera in a way that you can see the Copperworks Distilling site. So let me flip this around. And I'm going to actually walk around and give you a little bit of the tour. The first thing that you may have already come to Copperworks, you would have noticed that we have handmade stills. These are made in Scotland. And these are what we do all of our distilling for. And we actually have a still for each product. So this is our gin still. This one is named Nancy, and it makes all of the gin. This one is our spirit still that makes the whiskey and also drives a column still. And this is the column still, which does all of the grain neutral spirits. So grain neutral spirits is alcohol that's at 190 proof or above. And we use that both for the vodka and the gin. And then this big still over here is called the beer stripping still. And this still is what we use to do all of the very first distillation. So I sort of gave you a backwards view of everything. That beer stripping still takes beer that we've made and turns it into an alcohol, a preliminary alcohol, and then we re-distill it into the vodka, gin, or whiskey. So I'm looking through the back door on the waterfront. There's construction, and that can right now. But we normally make a beer with no hops and then distill everything into alcohol. So these are fermenters here. And the fermenters are where we do all of our fermentation on site. So we don't actually do brewing here. We brew at 3 brewing partners, the Pike Brewing, the Elysian Brewing, and Fremont Brewing. Once that beer has been fermented, then we'll bring this back over to the still house and do distillation. And Jeff, you let me know if there's anything that I need to do to make a change. I see a couple of chats coming up, but I want to make sure it's nothing I need to make a change for. Yeah, I'm also showing you here that, okay, we're just getting some other folks settled in, right? Good. What you see here is the barrel storage. Unfortunately, we have more barrels than we can store in this physical location. And that's what catalyzed the whole process of looking for another place sooner rather than later. So as you know, if we're going to make everything from beer and then put it into barrels to age whiskey, these are barrels that are hydrating, getting ready to have gin put in them, because we also do cast finished gin. That we're going to need more room as we grow. Every year, we should be able to put up a minimum of 120 barrels. And if we are successful in all of our fundraising, we'll be able to go to a maximum of 10 times that, 1,200. So what I'm doing now, I'm going to give a quick walk into our tasting room, and I'll show you that folks are able to come in off of the waterfront. The waterfront last year had, well, not last year, 2019, pre-pandemic, had 7.1 million visitors. They're building a new aquarium in the across the street from us and right up the road. they're expecting to be able to have as many as 21 million customers a year. So this place is perfectly positioned to really grow, but not big enough to get everybody in. So we wanted to have a place next door as a experience center or a visitor center where people could actually come in, not just taste and buy a bottle, but have a cocktail. So I'm gonna walk outside. I'm gonna show you what the route is to our next door. So again, here we are on the Seattle waterfront. You can see all the construction.
Yeah, and things might get a little choppy technologically speaking here as he moves from one space to the next. If we don't get the video to show, you'll see it's only about a 20-foot walk around the corner and we get to the other space, which he should be at soon.
Yes. So as I walk down the road, we're coming into, this will be the entrance to the restaurant. But I'm going to continue down to the end of this block just to show you what we're looking at.
Yeah, we're not
here.
seeing your video right now for whatever reason. We're hearing you, but.
Oh, okay. Okay. Tell you what, I will take a look and see if I can't get it. I'm going to stop the video and then start the video.
Travis is asking, is it the old gym? No, it's actually next door. It's right on the corner. It used to be a furniture store is the space that we're looking at.
And Jeff, are you seeing the video now?
You know, it started, but it froze. Maybe if you get closer to the buildings.
All right. You know, I bet I know what's going on. It's probably that it thinks that I'm on a
Sorry for the technical delay. Hopefully once he gets in the building, we tested it out yesterday. It worked pretty well in the building. So hopefully that'll straighten things out. Yeah, John says we'll get better Wi-Fi for sure. Yeah, we'll get Wi-Fi period if we lease the space. And Jason, when your video was on, we were starting to see the door of the new space. There, we're getting it back, I think. You're on mute, so if you're speaking, we can't hear you, but the video seems to work.
Okay, good. Great.
There you are.
Sounds like we're here. So I just came in the new space. I'm going to wander around it just a little bit. What I'd like you to see is that what is straight up the stairs there is the Seattle Art Museum. You can see that black sculpture called Hammering Man. Those stairs are called the Harbor Steps, and they're actually turning that into.
Unfortunately, it seems to be stuck again. We're not seeing what you're saying. Sorry, Jason.
That's okay. Here, I'm going to turn off my my Wi-Fi and go entirely to cell and see if that makes things better.
Probably trying to reach the old school Copperworks Wi-Fi.
Yes, probably so. So give that a second to reset. It looks like I have good Wi-Fi, and strangely enough, this worked well yesterday, but of course, that was yesterday. So right, are you getting a video now?
Sort of, yeah. We're seeing out the window up the steps.
Okay, okay, great. I'll turn around in a second. But the point is that we're going to have the other view coming down from the Seattle Art Museum and coming down the steps that are, in fact, the destination restaurant zone for this part of Seattle. So we will literally be on that corner. And as people come from downtown Seattle, they'll see us on their way to the waterfront. And then, of course, when they come from the waterfront, as you saw a few minutes ago, they'll see the distillery there. So this place, we're going to have a chance to look at drawings in just a second. Jeff has those queued up. But this place is just a wide open shell with wooden floors and 2 stories. This downstairs story will be entirely restaurant and I'm going to actually call it a cocktail bar with food. So it's going to be more of a cocktail bar. We'll have an ADA lift, but right now that's not in. So I'm going to walk up the stairs to the second floor. And then and of course there'll be better lighting when we're open. And the second floor is also a big, wide open space. This place was built in 1918. The whole building was Pacific net and twine. And so it's built with great structural integrity. These huge columns in the middle of the building actually add a lot of texture to the place. You can see the transform windows, so these things actually will open. And again, looking out the window to the harbor steps on that side, and then on this side, actually looking down towards the Seattle waterfront. So this would be a event space. In that corner that I'm looking at, that wall would have a bar, so a second auxiliary bar. This whole space will be walled off in a way that we can have two separate businesses running at once. Up here, there can be an event, and downstairs, there can be a customer experience where the restaurant is serving cocktails and they don't have to be connected. People will have to come in through the restaurant to get to the upstairs event space. And you can imagine there could be a time when the entire place is bought out and we were able to have an event in both the upstairs and the downstairs. Downstairs holds about 180 people, but you know, if we start putting in furniture and the bar and the restaurant and everything else, is probably going to be closer to 120 people. And upstairs, again, will be about 120 or 125 people. So that's the tour here. I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff while I walk back into the distillery, and then we can answer questions and we'll show you the designs of the place. Thank you.
Just searching for my mute button. There it is. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, and one question, if you can still hear me, I'll let you field this one. Somebody said, will it actually physically connect to the distillery space?
Yeah, that's a great question. Let me go back on video here for a second. It can physically connect, but it doesn't have to. So in this back corner, we actually have the ability to put a doorway both upstairs and downstairs. We think of it as more sort of a speakeasy access as opposed to a normal access. It'd be a way to bring people into the barrel room from the restaurant. And I think that would be a lot of fun to do on special VIP tours, perhaps doing a special type of event. We would take people in there, but it's not going to be the normal entrance. The normal entrance will be through the front doors.
Yeah, and I'm going to let you stay on spotlight just to show, you know, since we had a bunch of lag earlier, maybe we'll do it this time. If you want to walk back to the distillery, so then it shows people kind of how close that is, you know, even though it won't have a main entrance that's shared, it is quite close.
So I just exited that building and I'm now walking down the road. You can see the Copperworks sign there on the edge. This area right here is the wheelchair entrance or the ADA access to the distillery. And then this is the standard Copperworks entry. So we're right here. So in the event that people wanted to be in the distillery while there's a rainstorm going on and then walk next door, we're going to keep a couple of umbrellas. Not a couple, but a dozen umbrellas right by the door so that people can just walk back and forth, drop off the umbrella, and there you go. Cool. And now I'm in the tasting room.
Thanks. So now we can, so we've kind of seen how short that connection is. Now I'll bring up the renderings of the plans. If you guys have been on the Start Engine page, you've probably seen some of this before, but these are some slightly updated versions of it. So this first view here, this is basically right as you walk into the door of the new space. So the bar is going to be sort of front and center, this nice kind of wraparound bar with some cool details. That's actually about the third iteration of that design. So the columns, present challenges, but I think the architects have really come up with a really cool way to work with the columns and make the bar, feel like one bar, but also have, kind of three separate spaces in a way, and some kind of cool curved details and retaining, some semblance of a back bar, which of course is always nice to have when you're trying to display your products and, maybe some other products. Then we'll kind of take it around, whoops, missed number 2. So that shows kind of coming around the side of it there. So you can see sort of that curved detail. You're also starting to see the staircase that leads to the upstairs, which is the event space Jason was talking about. So you'd come into the main entrance, and then, if your group was having a party, there'd probably be, some signage or even a host in the front that would direct you to your private event upstairs. Again, there is the option to rent out the whole thing if we ever wanted to do that for anyone. And then moving to the other side of the bar, you're going to see, obviously some of that view to the side there will probably have some barrels or something kind of nice looking in the other side of the room. You'll see there's some, as it's currently presented, some chairs along the window. We're told by certain people that, some folks, especially when they're alone or with just one other person, they like to kind of look out, especially in the downtown of a city, some nice people watching. And then you can see sort of this kind of smaller bar over here. That'll be sort of the kitchen area. And so, the kitchen of this, we're still working on kind of menu concepts, but it's most likely going to be more of a focus on the cocktails and the bar program. The food is going to be, enough something that you could build a meal out of, but it's not necessarily going to be, a destination restaurant. It's more of a destination bar where you can get some, heavy snacks or very light versions of entrees, so to speak. So that'll be sort of the service area where our team is preparing some of those, meat boards, sandwiches, kind of simple dishes, whatever that ends up being. And then I think we have one more view down here. Yeah, it just kind of continues around the corner there. Obviously, there's going to be some equipment in that area in order to do that food prep. That's not yet in this rendering, but that'll be part of the final plans. Jason, do you want to add anything before we move upstairs?
Yeah, I will mention real briefly that these renderings were done actually a long time ago, almost 4 months ago. And so don't get too hung up on the individual tables, the chairs, the light fixtures, the flooring, the colors, etc., because none of that detail has been specified. It's all going to look a lot nicer than it does in this mock-up. But this is a way to kind of give you an idea about how the space would be used. And that's really the main goal of these drawings.
For sure. Yeah, and then if we move upstairs, like Jason said, you see that little bar area that will be on that wall as you come up the stairs. There are most likely going to be some sort of service areas for caterers to use, depending on, how robust our kitchen ends up being. We may have, outside teams coming in for bigger events and things like that. Obviously, you see we could have projectors with drop-down screens going over windows. Those kind of things are super important for corporate events. So again, it's not necessarily going to look exactly like this, but we're just kind of showing you some of the ideas that we're thinking about using this space for and how it would be used. And it gives you, an idea for how many people can kind of fit in there. It's nice to have some of the folks in some of these renderings. And this is just kind of the sort of the opposite view of that, where you're seeing the end, seeing where a screen could drop down for projection. So you can see, you could set this up as, sort of standard like a restaurant, or you could have chairs in rows and things like that if it was more of a presentation type event. We are constantly told that the downtown area lacks good size event spaces. So that's one of the driving forces behind making this upstairs very suitable for that. We rent out our current distillery, but it's quite small. And we're always told that if it was just a little bit bigger, you would get a lot of event rentals for different kind of things. And a space like this, where it's easy to close down without closing down the rest of your operation, is much more appealing. With our current space, we have to turn customers away if we want to do a private rental event. Whereas this, you just direct them upstairs and they're ready to roll. So that kind of, I think, covers most of the downtown, unless, Jason, you have some things to add there before we move forward.
No, that's good. That's good. And we'll take questions on this in a minute, too. So we'll move on to the KENMORE location, and then we can come back to all your questions.
Yeah, so I'll let you kind of kick off the full site
Yeah.
plan here.
Well, so the long-term goal with the KENMORE plant was twofold. One was to build a bigger brewery, a warehouse to store our barrels, because we're, as you saw, we're running out of room. We have run out of room. To be honest, we already have 100 barrels in the warehouse that we're paying rent for now. So it'd be great to be able to see that rent being utilized as something more than just a warehouse. So the KENMORE idea came up. You'll see on the left-hand side of your screen, there's a building that has a line down the middle of it. And on the right-hand side of that is where we're starting. That is about 5,000 square feet. And we'd be building a brewery there. What you see a pub with more than likely a brewery in that pub. I'm going to give more detail on that in just a second, but I'm going to show you the rest of the site. At the top of the screen of the page there, you see where those trees are. In between there, so that's 522 that is going across there, and on the bottom of the screen is 175th, and to the left off screen is 68th and then 72nd. So for the people who know KENMORE. So what's in between that big road that's going across the whole top of the page, 522, and this piece of property is a trail, a 25-mile bike trail, which ends right up here in KENMORE. It's called the Burke-Gilman Trail. And it's a pretty amazing piece of property. Yes, that's true. There is a old stone and marble place that you see. We have relocated somewhere else in KENMORE and instead shown a parking structure right there in the center of this ring. That's where the cars and the trees and bushes are. The whole goal of this piece of property is it is the landlord's property, and they're looking to change it from its current use of just sort of legacy businesses that have been on there for the past 10 or even 15 years and begin to move it more into an investment piece of property, which was their goal all along. So if we're their first tenant, we may end up being their only tenant. It just depends on what the strategy is of the landlords and how long they want to wait for us to build everything out. But we would like to start by building a pub and a brewery in what used to be called 9 Yards Brewing. So it's that little building in the right-hand side that says 5,000 square feet on it. We'll probably need to grow fairly quickly, so there'll be some space that we'll have to grow somewhere else on there to add fermentation. Again, we're relying on the landlord to make decisions as about what spaces they want to open for us. But I know they really are interested in removing the stone and tile company and getting that place cleaned up with landscaping, better lighting, sidewalks, customer access to the whole property. Our access to the Burke-Gilman Trail will be, Jeff drew a little color, sort of an orange or pinkish color onto our current site that we're working on now. And directly above that is what's going to be turned into our beer garden. We may actually be able to run that beer garden to be longer and wider down in the space where the parking garage is, but we'll just have to see, or where the parking is, but we'll just have to see what the city allows. That's work we're still working with the city on. So the strategy for all of this, as you look on this drawing, has Copperworks eventually taking over different parts of that property. And again, all of this is to be determined with the landlord's interest, our needs. So we do not need to take over that whole piece of property if we're not interested in paying rent on it all. Or when we're ready, we can phase into it. They're very interested in working with us for the long term and giving us long leases on that. So I'm going to pause there. Jeff, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that pretty well covers it. I mean, you know, part of it is obviously as we get into the projects, there become kind of good opportunities to combine certain parts, and that's why, you know, Jason hinted at potentially a brewing space inside of that first location. And yeah, you might have wanted to get into that a little bit later, but you know, some of it's based on what we're seeing with COVID and construction costs, and you know what we're hearing as feedback from the city. So we're just trying to be as smart as we can with the, money that investors have given us. So we're trying to do this in the best possible way, fulfill all of our needs without, putting bad money somewhere that it doesn't need to go.
That's right. Yeah. So as Jeff mentioned, one of the key factors in our decisions is going to be what the city wants. In other words, what they're willing to permit, how long those permits are going to take, what equipment we need, and what the lead time is on that. Everything is, of course, you're aware, everything is stuck in ports around the world and on shipping containers, and there's a lack of truckers to move things around the warehouses. So lead times have gone from months to years on certain things. So we're trying to be pretty strategic in how we open sooner rather than later. It's to everybody's advantage to do that, to ours, to go ahead and start making whiskey, to KENMORE's, to the landlords. Everything is fungible, meaning that we can make a decision as to where to put something yet, because we haven't gotten a permit for anything yet, although we have already been through what's called the pre-permitting process. So the city knows what we're doing, they're behind it, they're actually super supportive, which is wonderful to hear. They gave us a few suggestions, and we have to do a traffic survey. We're going to get a more detailed survey of this area, and then we should be ready to start pulling a permit. Why don't we show a couple of inside pictures, and then we can start talking about your questions in the chat. So this is looking from, if you were looking at the way that building was laid out, this is from 175th. So this is at the bottom of that screen before, in that 5,000 square foot building, looking straight up to the back end of that building. It's basically sort of a big hangar of really nice architectural structures with those metal beams the way they are. Where you see the barrels on the left is instead where we're considering putting a brewery right away, instead of waiting for a few years to build the brewery. What we have right now, our initial plans were to just store some barrels in there, because we do need barrel storage as well. Why don't we go to the next slide, and then we'll take a look at, this is from the other end, looking back towards the road of 175th. So now we're standing in exactly the opposite side. What you'll see in the middle, that brown square, is the bar. And then the gray area is where the restaurant would be. The kitchen would be to serve the restaurant. We're going to be building a pretty big kitchen, because we believe that that property will be able to support pretty big numbers. And we'd like to build the kitchen and the bar once, instead of having to build multiple ones, or build it twice, build it and then tear it out and build it again bigger. So the goal here is to build a kitchen sufficient enough to serve both inside and outside customers, and to have a bar that will support that as well. And then one more view, just kind of looking, you can see that there's these roll-up garage doors. The area right outside of this building will also be accessible for chairs, picnic tables, and people to gather there. So if you can think back to that original drawing, looking down onto the site, that would be right above that middle parking area. And then this is just the bar, no details. And of course, it's not going to look exactly like a fictitious bar. It'll be very well designed, but that shows you about how much space it should be taking.
Yeah, and I think, if you go back to this view and look at where the barrels are here, and, Jason mentioning the possibility of a brew house there, I think what's important to note is right behind those barrels could be, a cutout access to the building next door. That's that large building next to it. I'll go back to the site plan, the building that says distillery barrel storage, 7,000 square feet, and an event space at the bottom. So that's where the opportunity, if we did put a brewery into the restaurant space, you could then imagine that brewery expanding to become larger and larger into that next building. But again, this is all things we're still kind of working on. We wanted to sort of introduce the concept here, start, talking about it a bit, but, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like quite yet.
Yeah, and just while you keep that screen up, I'll point out what some of the property is being used for now, just so you can get your bearings for people who know. At the very top middle of that screen, let me see, it says Distillery Stills and Barrels. That is where 192 Brewing is currently. Yep, right there. And then over to the right where the beer garden is the 192 Beer Garden. So that's right there on the Burt Gilman Trail. To the left of the building that we've been showing you and spending most of our time talking about, that building is currently an auto repair place called Car Star. And then to the right-hand corner is a building that doesn't exist. That's our future, was originally our thought for a future brewery. However, if you go all the way over to the right, you'll see that we have some parking laid out. And what's in that space right now is actually about 10,000 square feet down in the right-hand corner. About 10,000 square feet is reserved for a landscape company's tools, trucks, and a few piles of dirt that they use to move around. So, so again, all of that is up to what Copperworks needs, but also what the landlord would like to do with this property. Let's go to the chat, unless Jeff, unless you have anything else you'd like to say, and we'll start answering some questions.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. If I could just figure out how to show my mouse here. All right. Got it back. Stop that share and we'll see ourselves. All right, so let's go back up sort of the top so we don't miss anything. So the first question that we haven't talked about yet is how long of a lease are we looking at, and what's the time frame for build out? So we'll probably want to take that in multiple parts.
Yeah, so of course the lease in I think that question might have been about the one next door. I'll mention it for both places.
I think so, yeah.
The lease is still under negotiation, so we have an LOI. The goal will be to get long-term leases in both of these places. The place that we're at now has 2 more years on its first 10-year lease. And then we've already renewed for another 10 years after that, plus another 5-year renewal. So that means we're in this downtown location for 17 years. What we, and the same building owner owns this place as the place that we walk through next door that we're looking at an event center and a cocktail bar. So we would tie the lease to the same terms and times of this current lease. That's their interest, it's our interest. In other words, we would be doing 17 years or 10 more years with a 5-year renewal on that place next door. Up in KENMORE, as we add buildings or property sections, maybe we have an outside seating. As we get more and more invested in that place, we're going to be adding more years to the lease. If we end up building a bunch of buildings on that property, the lease will be dozens of years, maybe even 40 or 50 years. That would be our interest, and so would it be the landlord's. But if we end up only doing just the 9 yards building and stopping there for some period of time, then we'll probably do the similar thing we're doing here at 5 years, 10 years, and then adding renewals to it.
Yeah, and then in terms of time frame for build out, so in KENMORE, we are we're hopeful to have something open, you know, from a retail standpoint. So consumers coming in, drinking cocktails, tasting spirits, potentially, you know, full food menu by the summer of 2022. So that's you know, with everything going on in terms of construction during COVID and all working with, you know, municipalities during COVID, that may be a little aggressive. So we're not making any promises, but that is, you know, kind of the goal we're working with right now for that space. In terms of the downtown next door, we don't really have a timeline set for that yet. Like Jason said, we're kind of in the letter of intent phase there. So there's not as much of a, you know, desire to hit a particular date. That's going to take some more fundraising to get to that space to a, you know, a finalized lease. So, you know, TBD on that space, but Jason might add some more to that.
Yeah, let's be clear about the fact that we are not going to overspend and do every project if we don't have the funds raised for it. So the most important thing for us is to be able to continue to build that brewery production, because if we're going to be selling much more whiskey than we are today, which is of course our goal, we have to be able to make much more whiskey than we are today. And our limiting factor is the brewing. It's not the distilling. It's not the packaging, but it's actually the fact that we need more brewing capacity than our 3 partner breweries can provide us by about tenfold. So to do that, we'd have to build our own brewery. We certainly want that brewery to be in a place where people can come and explore and learn about us. So that's why we picked that KENMORE spot. We'll build this place next door in downtown Seattle. So the cocktail bar that we toured, an event center. If we raise enough money, and enough money is probably going to be close to $3.5 million. Now that means through both the fundraiser that we're looking at now, and also other methods of raising money. We certainly don't have to get everything through equity crowdfunding, but we do want to get as many people involved as we can. That gives the other, the banks or the other loan sources a lot of confidence that we have the support of the community to come in and make that work.
Yeah, the next question, I think we kind of already addressed this. Would we consider cladding the columns in wood or other decorative materials? I think we kind of talked about how these are just sort of renderings, and absolutely we're going to consider, what the interior looks like. We'll have input, we'll work with the architects, the contractors, and then our own designers that we work with for our packaging and other parts of Copperworks, look, feel, and brand. So definitely, there's options all over the place in terms of what the interior ultimately looks like. And then we have a question about providing financial information to investors. So right now, the Start Engine page is a great resource for that. If you use that page and go to the offering memorandum, which is about an 80-page PDF, that actually has all of our audited financials in it. So those are, as up to date as you're going to get. If you are an investor, you get, sales data from us quarterly. So you kind of keep up with how things are going. So that's, important kind of financial data as well. But in terms of, financial statements that are complete, not only reviewed, but audited, the Start Engine page is going to have those for the years that those are completed. So check those out. And then there's 3 years worth of them. And then there's a question in South Carolina, when to purchase, can we ship? Yeah, we can ship to about 37 states right now. So you can go to our online store, store.copperworksdistilling.com. If you are an investor at a certain level, one of the perks is a discount code. So keep that in mind if you are considering investing. For Start Engine, if you do $2,200 or more, you get that 10% off discount. And that starts shortly after your investment. Once it officially closes, which usually takes a couple of weeks, you can get access to that code, pretty quickly. And then there's a question about, do we have plans for aged bourbon? I certainly can answer that, but Jason being the Kentucky boy, I'll let him take that one.
Yeah, well, I love bourbon, and we decided not to make bourbon. We decided to make another type of whiskey. It's called American Single Malt Whiskey, which means instead of being based on corn, it's based on malted barley. So that's why we keep talking about making beer into spirits, is that I've been a brewer, and my business partner, Micah Nutt, had been a brewer for many years. So what we literally do is we make a beer out of 100% malted barley and distill it into whiskey, vodka, and gin. You saw perhaps at the beginning of this tour that we had about 400 barrels of whiskey aging now. We'd like that to be closer to 4,000 barrels of whiskey aging, maybe even 5,000 barrels at any one time. So we have a lot of work to do, but we also have a good start at it. We've been making whiskey now for 8 years.
Yeah, so we could spend an entire day talking about why we chose to make American Single Malt versus bourbon, but the real short answer is we're going to leave bourbon to the folks that are already making it, and we want to make this new category of whiskey, and that's really what we're focused on.
That's right.
Then just a quick comment. Someone I see some family member gave a nice testimonial, and that's why they invested. So thank you. That's awesome to hear. Obviously, that's one of the fun things is we have a product that you can taste and decide if it's worth the investment. So we'd encourage you to do that. Let's see. We've got a question about economics of the build out and forecasted revenue margin projections for the new space, for events, customer space. in year one. Yeah, that is tremendously important, and it's something we've been working on for many months now, and we have sort of rounds of drafts of that. But as new information comes in, we're honing in on to, you know, some better answers for that. But yeah, absolutely, we don't plan to make, you know, the final decisions on anything until we have that information finalized as well. So we completely agree with you. And you know, I'll let Jason add a few things here.
Well, we in order to come up with those numbers, we actually hired two people, a man named Nick Jarvis, and Nick has been a restaurateur for about 15 years. He's opened, for the past 7 years, he was opening Tom Douglas restaurants. For those who are in the Northwest, you might recognize that name. Tom Douglas had 15 restaurants open before the pandemic. Not all of them made it through. As a matter of fact, most of them. He was smart enough to close, and now he's reopening. But Nick opened some of the best of the Tom Douglas restaurants, but he also opened his own, down in Portland, which is where he is now, his own hamburger bars, and he's opened a lot of different type of places. The reason I'm talking about him so much is that he is the one who is helping us figure out what our revenue should be, how much what our food costs should be, what our staffing model will be, how long people should be there, what our average ticket price will be, and helping us really decide how to have the food part right. On the other hand is a man named Chris Elford. Chris has opened up both James Beard awarded restaurants in New York and in James Beard nominated restaurants here in Seattle. And he has given us sort of the program for the bar, what our pour costs should be, what sort of tools we need, what equipment we need, where it needs to be, what the staffing model will be, all the way down to what sort of lighting and what sort of atmosphere we need to make a really high quality bar. And those consultants are helping us with both of the places in KENMORE and next door. Thirdly, then upstairs in the next door Seattle place is an event center. Now, we've been doing events here for the past 8 years, but I will not call ourselves event experts. We simply know how to throw a good party in our tasting room. But in terms of actually soliciting and finding events, pricing them right, having the right equipment, getting the right in front of the right people at the right trade shows and organizations, we're also hiring somebody to do that. We will not do that alone without expertise. The good news is this place has already been, the place we're looking at next door has already been, even while it's been mothballed, considered as a destination event space. So there have been events in there, even lately. We're looking forward to actually having a much nicer place. As you can see, it's just a shell right now, to where we'll be able to hold great events. And the event planners that I have walked through there have literally drooled at the opportunity, thinking how good this is going to be, and its location is incredible. So that's the event space. So yeah, we will get all of that information, continue to be detailed all the way down to a week by week cash flow. Now, we're not going to do all of that level of analysis if we know we don't have the funds to go forward. So one begets the other, and I understand that we need a high level of magnitude order in order to get the investments, but then we're also going to have to look at more detail, use some of that money to do the really detailed decisions. What equipment will come in, what will be the cost. We're negotiating. I have to say I'm very proud of how hard we're negotiating and how good the landlords are treating us in helping fund that next door build out. But I will have more details for you as we go.
Yeah, great. So next question, what's going to happen to 192 Brewing? They were next door to 9 Yards.
Yeah, they're not exactly next door. They're actually at the top of that property. So we actually have no plans for that building right now. We are simply working in what's called what used to be called the 9 Yards building instead of the 192 building. And if we do grow, Jeff mentioned that fermenters could go into what's now called Carstar. We also talked about the fact that the landlord's very interested in removing the Alexander stone art and cleaning that area up so it looks a little bit nicer and more presentable for restaurants. In terms of what the landlords have in store, I really don't know. That is a decision that they're making now, is what do they want this place to be as their investment property? What do they want it to look like? How much money are they willing to put in? What sort of tenants do they want on there? I know that we are one of those tenants that they're very interested in having in. And I really can't answer what's going to happen to 192, but we are not looking to build into that building at any particular time.
Great. Yeah. And then next question, I think we, again, have kind of addressed. It says, is that enough bicycle parking? Again, this is all just kind of, conceptual plans. We do recognize that there is a lot of need for, bike parking in the summer up there. It can look like Copenhagen. So we totally get that that's a big part of the crowd up there at certain times of year. So we'll make sure to be thinking about that.
Let me throw another note in there. So one of the things that I'm working on now, already been connecting with the city council. We're now a member of the business community up there in KENMORE, but we're working with the city council. And then next we'll be forming a advisory board. An advisory board, some of the people who are going to be on that advisory board will be people who are current fans of 192. So other people who will be on that advisory board will be people who are looking for different things in that area. And then finally, the bicycle clubs, people who use the Burt Gilman Trail. What do they want? What type of parking bike parking would they like to have? And then, of course, non-bicyclists, what types of restaurant do they want to go to, and what do they want the place to be like? So we're going to try to serve all interest as best we can. Bike parking is going to be a huge part of it, but so is car parking, and so is indoor and outdoor dining.
Yeah. So next question, kind of a big, kind of overarching question about, what to expect long-term from an investment. So it says, alludes to, we should only expect an ROI if the company sells. Is that the goal? If not, are there any triggers that will result in a dividend?
Yeah. So the long-term, let's just talk a little bit about what a production distillery's exit strategy ever is. You got two things. If your name ends in Beam, then you keep it in the family and you are now a global player. Actually, I guess that's not true, is it? Beam sold to Suntory, a Japanese company. So in fact, even their big distilleries have an exit to even a bigger distillery. That's our goal. Our goal, and we're building this place to be extremely successful, is to be bigger than Jeff and I and a team of Seattleites and KENMORE employees can manage. We need this to be attractive to a bigger company that knows how to take sales nationally and internationally. And in order to do that, we have to have a few really key things. We have to have the infrastructure to produce our own beer, our own wash. We have to have lots of barrels in inventory. We have to be hitting some key numbers of how many products we're selling and how much revenue we're making. We don't necessarily have to be profitable. We have to be on a pathway to profitability, making the right types of products and winning the awards, getting the accolades, and having the success that we've been having. So I think we're on the right track to build an extremely successful company. But the exit strategy is when we all win. That's when we all find that this was worth it.
Yep, great. So then there's a question sort of off topic, but I like the question. Do you have a barrel program? Can we buy a barrel to age full ? Yes, absolutely. We're always open to talking about things like that. Most of the time when we're doing that, it's typically for a retail store or for a larger restaurant group. But we absolutely can do that with, just individuals who want to, get together with some friends and buy a whole barrel. And we can structure it in different ways. You can buy a barrel that's mature and we can bottle it for you in a couple of months. That's one way to do it. Or, we can talk about filling a barrel, you coming down, actually helping us fill it, and then, waiting till it's ready. So that's obviously a longer term endeavor. Obviously, the pricing is different depending on, which direction you're going into. One is more immediate. One, arguably is a little more fun if you get to taste the barrel along the way. But yeah, reach out to us via really any of our email addresses. You can do IR for investor relations at copperworksdistilling.com. That's probably kind of the best way from this forum to get in touch. Definitely happy to talk about that.
Yep. Right. Yep. The bad news is all of our barrels are 53 gallons, so you need to think about what you would want to do with 250 bottles of whiskey. But in a corporate environment, that's certainly reasonable. We have done that for, as Jeff said, for restaurants. We've also done it for corporations.
Yep, perfect. So then a question about the board of advisors. How many are on it currently, and how often do we meet?
We don't have the board of advisors built yet. So the board of advisors for all of this is a thing that I am working on. Part of it is investors who are very large investors. I think we have, Jeff, is it what, $100,000 gets you a seat on the board of advisors?
That's right, yeah.
But I'm also looking for folks who are in our blind spots. So folks in national or international distribution, folks in finance, and thinking about the bigger expenses we're going to be getting into, restaurant work, things that we have experience in, but we aren't doing currently. Those will be folks on the board of advisors. So the board that I was talking about in KENMORE is more of a community relations board. That's going to be folks who talk about what they want to see before we even build up in KENMORE. It won't be a board, at least I don't anticipate it being in perpetuity. It's going to be to help us get open, to make sure that we're listening well, that we're taking in input and have a good pathway to learn what the community wants. But once we've built, we won't be asking for the same level of involvement.
Yeah, and then another question is kind of on that same topic. We mentioned connecting with groups for market research. Can you go into more detail? I think Jason would take this, but I think it's more, kind of what he was just talking about is really staying connected, paying attention to the community. We've obviously done that for 8 years in downtown Seattle, and we've already started doing that in KENMORE. So it's not necessarily, hey, we're going to go spend money and pay, some group to do market research. It's more that we're going to become part of groups that are, in the community. Like Jason's already been going to the KENMORE chamber meetings on a, almost weekly basis, I think. So from those kind of meetings, you meet certain people and you have conversations and you learn from other folks. So it's really just immersing ourselves in the community and paying attention and not trying to force our own thing in there, but doing something that works for that community.
Yeah. By the way, I see a nice call out to Dave LeClaire. I've known David for probably 15 years. And yeah, definitely he's a good resource. He's a type of event that's more traveling events. In other words, he doesn't do as many events for a company that has a space they're trying to rent on a regular daily basis. But we have actually engaged with folks who do that work for the Pike Place Brewery, or what's now called Pike Brewing Company, and for Westland Distilling, as well as several caterers, 3 different caterers have given us advice on what to do for events. So I think we have some pretty good resources there too.
Fantastic. Well, I don't see any kind of, that aren't individual comments or questions. So any big picture things coming through. We're at about the hour mark. So that seems like kind of a good time to wrap up. If you do have a quick question, let us know quickly here. But do remember, you can always ask questions on the Start Engine page. So that's easy to get to. If you got here, you probably know it, but it's just startengine.com/copperworksdistilling. You can also obviously navigate there through our website or our Facebook, that has links to it. And you can always email us, IR for investor relations at copperworksdistilling.com, and ask questions that way. Again, we're really hoping folks can, connect us with other investors. I know a lot of people on this call are already investors. Of course, you can always consider, upping your investment amount if you're looking at a particular perk, or if you just, are seeing more of the plans and believing in more of the vision. But also, we'd love it if you connect us with your friends, family, colleagues, et cetera, that might be interested in learning more.
Great. Well, thank you again. Thanks for spending the time with us. And we'll definitely be here doing a lot more planning, and we'll have more communications. Watch the Start Engine space for that, because that actually is the only legal place. So this video has to be posted up there, and it is the only legal place that we can present information about the terms of the offering, which include things like financials. So that's where we'll be sending things. Thank you again. It was really great hearing from you guys. Reach out to Jeff and I through ir@copperworksdistilling.com.
Cheers, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.